It looks like I filmed this video on a different day when in reality I actually just changed my shirt. It's all an illusion. Hey howdy! Welcome back to my channel. Today I am here to do my June wrap-up. I'm pre-filming this because I'm going on vacation at the end of June, so I won't be able to film like an actual June wrap-up at the end of the month. So a couple books that I will have read in the month of June that I'm finishing up this week won't be put in a video until my July wrap-up, so that's why this one seems like there's not very many books in it. But that being said, I do still have some to go through with you. I'm very excited about them because I read a lot of good books this month. Like, there's a lot that I really enjoyed. So let's get started. First book I read in the month of June was Grief is the Thing with Feathers by Max Porter. This book was incredible. I loved the style of it. I get that it's a very different style, it's a very experimental style, but I personally really enjoyed it. I have really enjoyed poetry and experimental kind of poetry prose writing, so that really came as no surprise to me. I thought the character of Crow was awesome. I loved how harsh he was and how funny he was, because I just thought that correlated really well with, you know, how harsh and emotional grief can be. Like, when you think of grief, you think of the emotion of sadness, but I feel like Crow held a lot more of the emotions of grief, like anger and frustration and, you know, the very dark humor that comes out of death that, you know, you just don't get as much when it comes to books about grieving. And so I really liked that. I 100% cried at the end and also parts of the middle. I read it in a single day. It's really, really short. One of my favorite passages in it I'll read for you. Moving on as a concept is for stupid people, because any sensible person knows grief is a long-term project. I refuse to rush the pain that is thrust upon us. Let no man slow or speed or fix. That was probably my favorite line in the whole book, but throughout the whole book I was marking everything, and at the end when I finished it, I do this sometimes with poetry books that I really like. I'll write down all the lines and passages that I really enjoyed in my journal so I can like have them saved there forever, regardless of whether or not I get rid of the book or I lose it or something like that. So I did that with this book. Just overall really enjoyed it. 5 out of 5 stars. And then the next book I read, you all saw me read in my reading vlog this month, which was The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, the prequel, pre-novel to The Hunger Games. I'm not going to talk a ton about this book. If you want to know more about my thoughts on it, then definitely go watch that vlog. I talked about it in depth there. The ultimate summary of my thoughts on it, where I enjoyed the first 2 parts, and then the third part just kind of threw everything for me. I really didn't like it. I thought it was unnecessary and meandering and just overall kind of pointless in the length of the story. I felt like a lot of the points that she got to in the third part of the book could have been gotten to in the second part of the book, and it felt a lot like it was just in there for a word count. But I did really enjoy the first and second part. I enjoyed all the new characters we were introduced to, not including the main character of this book, which is Snow, but all of the side characters I did really enjoy. So I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I went back and forth between 3 out of 5 and 4 out of 5. Ultimately, I decided to give it the benefit of the doubt and give it 4 out of 5. It was really enjoyable, and Suzanne Collins is a really good writer, and so I overall liked it. The next book I read this month was a ebook, and it was Darling Rose Gold by Stephanie Roble. This book was entertaining for sure. It was a very quick read. It felt like it went by very quickly. It's a book about a girl who in her childhood was abused by her mother in the form of Munchausen's by proxy, which is where a mother pretends that their child is sick, or pretends or truly believes that their child is sick so they can get attention and caring from those around them and from their child. A lot of times it's either because they want attention or money, or because they want their child to continually give them the attention they crave. A lot of times it's a very narcissism-based disease. This book in particular, you can tell, really drew knowledge and references from the case of Gypsy Rose and Dee Dee Blanchard, which was where Gypsy Rose, the child who was the victim of Munchausen's by proxy, her and her internet boyfriend ended up murdering her mother, Dee Dee, and she went to prison for it. She went to prison for life for it. And so a lot of things in this book, like even from the name, Rose Gold, and how her mom went to jail, and how they had a neighbor, then that's how they found out, like all those things kind of really parallel the story. But this is different in that the mother is not murdered and the mother is sent to prison, and then when she gets out, Rose Gold agrees to take her in, and then it's kind of like this whole what's going on, what happened to Rose Gold in the time that her mother was in prison, how did she change as a person, and how is she going to deal with living with her mother now. It definitely had some twists that I was not expecting when I started the book. I didn't really know it was going to be like kind of a thrillery type book, and it definitely wasn't like on terms of like a real thriller, like it wasn't edge of your seat, but there was a couple things that you were like, oh, I didn't know that was gonna happen, or ooh, twist. Yeah, that whole chunk of me speaking did not make any sense. Overall, I enjoyed it. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. The next book is a replacement for a book that I had originally planned to read this month. I had planned to read The Upside of Being Down by Jen Gotch, but after the George Floyd situation and the protests, it came out that Bando as a corporation and Jen Gotch in particular have been supportive of racism and not being an inclusive workplace environment. So that put me off completely to that book, and I was like, okay, well, I am no longer have interest in that. I can't enjoy somebody's memoir if I am just thinking the whole time about how racist they are as a person and how disrespectful they are of human life. So I threw that one off of the agenda, and in its place I read Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This book it's very short. It's only, I think I read it in like a couple hours. It's very short, it's very personal. It's written as like a letter, he writes it as like a letter to his son, so it's very personal to him and his family. But it's also very powerful in his connections to the world and his connections to his son and the way that he was raised, and how the parenting in the situation he was raised differs from the way he sees parenting now, in terms of race, and just his whole life in terms of how racism has contributed it and how he thinks racism will continue to contribute to his son's life. So it's a very personal, very touching look at racism in America, but also in being so personal, I think that it connects on a level to the whole as something that the typical African American goes through. So I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It did make me interested to read some of his fiction as well. He's written a couple fiction books, I believe. The next book I read was I Am Not Okay With This by Charles Forsman. This is a graphic novel about a girl who is 15 and just going through high school and her life, and also has a ability to make people hurt with her brain. You find out in the book that it's an ability that her dad had as well, and it's just about her going through teenage life. I definitely see how this was a good premise for a TV show. I definitely see what Netflix saw in it when they read the book. It's very teenage angst. The comic is actually pretty mature. I would definitely put a trigger warning on it for suicide and rape. But it is also very true to high school life, I think, and how difficult it can be. It is very dark, so if you don't like dark things, don't read it, but I personally enjoy dark things, so I really enjoyed it. The last book I read was Sin Eater by Megan Campisi. This book is amazing. I am shocked that I have not heard more people talking about it. The premise is so unique. This book follows our main character May as she is taken to jail for stealing a loaf of bread. She is sentenced to become a sin eater, which every town has, and they go around eating foods that represent the sins of the dead. So when somebody dies, they go to their house and they eat all these foods that correlate to their confessed sins, and they eat them on their deathbed so they can go to heaven without having to worry about being judged for the things that they did in life. And so she is sentenced to become a sin eater. She meets the sin eater that comes before her and who starts to train her, but shortly after she becomes a sin eater, there is a development at the castle with the queen, and she is sort of thrust into this situation and this mystery that she did not want to be put in, but she feels that she has to resolve it and find out the secrets behind the situation of death in the castle so that she can be absolved of her sins. It was so dark, which I really loved. The dialect was so thorough. Like, I feel like when you read books that have like an old English kind of dialect, a lot of times there are like spaces where they do use modern terms, and there's a lot of like stuff that gets missed. This book does not have that at all. I thought it was so thorough with the dialect and the cadence of how people were talking where she lives, and so I thought that was great. I just thought it was really good. I thought it had a lot of literary merit. I thought the storytelling was great. It's only 280 pages, so it's not a very long book, but it had so much depth to it. May is only 14, and so another thing I really liked was that her thoughts and her words, even though she's solving this huge mystery, they do sound like that of a 14-year-old. Like, you do hear that fear come through and that confusion of, you know, growing up as a child and sort of having the realization, well, maybe God isn't real, maybe I'm wrong, maybe the people that I've been connected to my whole life are wrong. You know, if I am considered bad for what I did, then how am I able to help people? Like, things like that. I just thought it was so good, and I think that it needs to be read by more people. So if you are looking for a dark, Renaissance-y vibe kind of read, this is it. This is a good one. It has witches in it too, which I loved. I didn't even think that witches were gonna be in this book, so that was a nice, fun surprise, and there is like a mystery that you get to piece together as time goes on. So I thought it was just really great. I definitely will be wanting to read more by this author in the future. So these are the books that I read in June. And like I said, a couple of the books that I read in June will be included in my July wrap-up. So stay tuned for those, but I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed hearing about all the books I read. And that's pretty much it. 3 5-star reads, which is more than I think I've had in any month so far this year. The 3 5-star reads were Grief is the Thing with Feathers, Sin Eater, and I'm Not Okay with This. So just great books all around. Goodbye!